I guess I like the calm atmosphere at work, which is why I adore the early mornings. I open the window a little to let in some fresh air and water the potted plants beside the window. This routine hasn't altered since I began working for this organization. I'm 30 years old, and my name is Tom. Even though I work in sales for a large trading company, month after month, my sales performance is the lowest. My coworkers and bosses don't think well of me because they believe I'm unmotivated. Actually, I have no interest in working or moving up the corporate ladder. My primary responsibility has shifted to running errands for colleagues who are out conducting real sales work because I tend to be a nuisance when I join them on sales calls. My motto has been to live moderately, work moderately, and stay quiet. However, my quiet life got shaken up when Jessica transferred here this year. "You're early again today, Tommy," she greeted, wrapping her slender arms around my neck. I felt her warmth against my back. "Good morning, Jessica." "You're quite energetic in the morning," I replied, gently unwrapping her arms so as not to seem harsh. Jessica, our new supervisor, is 4 years older than me, a fluent speaker of 3 languages, and a true talent. Her cheerful, straightforward personality makes her popular with everyone, and those initially wary of having a female boss quickly came to respect her. For some reason, she's taken a liking to me, an average worker who doesn't excel at his job. She, on the other hand, is a go-getter and real career woman, so why she's so focused on me is beyond me. "It's not about that, Jessica. You're a bit too touchy-feely for my liking," I said, having become more assertive recently. She pouted, and after I moved her arms away, sat next to me, leaning back with an exaggerated stretch that made her spine crack. She probably worked late last night. She's always the first to arrive after me and often the last to leave. "Speaking your mind is fine, but treating me unfairly isn't cool," she replied, puffing her cheeks and giving my chair a little kick, like a sulking child, quite different from her professional demeanor. I still can't wrap my head around why such a talented, beautiful woman is so intent on pursuing me. The entire department seems to have accepted our dynamic, but I find it concerning. I constantly worry that my reputation might affect hers. Yesterday, I even made a wish at the local chapel for my peaceful days to return. Anyway, no excessive PDA, I told her coldly. She sighed but replied with a disgruntled, "All right." Truth be told, it isn't unpleasant to have someone like her around, though it comes with drawbacks. Jealous comments from male colleagues and a junior named Emily have become routine. Sneaking a glance at the back of Jessica, elegantly dressed in her slim-fitting pantsuit, I sighed again. After spending time abroad as a child, she reminds me of a past I'd rather forget. Only HR knows this, but I'm actually from overseas. My childhood was spent moving between countries due to my dad's job. I didn't return to the US until I was 15, which wasn't ideal timing for adapting to a new environment. Initially, I was confident I'd fit right in, but high school life here wasn't that straightforward. In 11th grade, a girl in my class, a queen bee of sorts, had it out for me. Rumors spread that I was showing off for having lived abroad, and the social freeze was immediate. My friends stopped talking to me to avoid her wrath. Feeling invisible, I resolved to leave the US after high school, eventually studying at Oxford. Years later, my mom, who was in poor health, asked me to return. Not mature enough to refuse, I honored her request, but the memories stayed. On my first day at this company, I promised myself to always stay under the radar. However, Jessica's presence is a constant disruption to my peaceful life, and I'm unsure how to handle it. Then, one scorching day, an even bigger problem appeared. My colleagues returned from assignments, guzzling cold water as soon as they got back to the office. I was in charge of organizing jogs, so I prepared rings for them, chilled wet towels, and did everything I could to support. I always made sure never to take center stage in my duties. "Tom, a customer specifically asked for you. My junior, Emily, approached me with a puzzled look on her face. It made sense. Nobody had ever specifically asked to speak to me for a business discussion before. Emily seemed a bit worried as she whispered to me in a voice others couldn't hear, "Are you okay?" "I'm not sure, but I'll meet with them anyway," I replied, trying to reassure her. I lightly patted little Emily's shoulder, yet she seemed to remain concerned and followed behind me. It looked like she intended to join me. I felt like a failure of a senior to have my junior this worried about me. Taking a deep breath, I said, "Excuse me," before knocking. A young woman's voice from the reception room responded, "Please come in." At that moment, cold sweat ran down my back, and I felt a slight dizziness. I instinctively wanted to run away, not understanding why. The moment I bravely opened the door, I was frozen on the spot. "How many years has it been? You didn't even attend graduation. I was worried if you were even alive." Bright red lips uttered those words. Despite her flat, ashy makeup, it suited her queenly demeanor perfectly. Lucy. Lounging on the reception room sofa was the very person who had brought about my downfall. Lucy. She was the last person I ever wanted to see. I probably looked quite shaken. From behind, Emily asked again, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I responded, taking a seat across from Lucy and saying, "Excuse me. When I saw you in the hallway earlier, I didn't think it was really you. I mean, who could have imagined back then that you'd be working for such a prestigious company?" Her condescending, arrogant tone was unchanged from our school days. She looked at me with a mocking upward glance and smirked. She seemed like a predator that had just spotted its prey, making my heart feel like it was going to jump out of my chest. Though I felt the need to say something, my mouth was dry, and no words would come out. Lucy enjoyed my distress, grinning broadly. I tried to remind myself I'm not that high school kid anymore. "Excuse me, did my subordinate do something rude?" I hadn't even noticed when Jessica entered the room, so hearing her voice nearly made me jump out of my skin. "Who are you?" Lucy asked with a frown, glaring at the sudden appearance. It seemed like she was annoyed, thinking her fun had been interrupted. "I'm Jessica, Tom's supervisor. Tom rarely handles business meetings, so I hope he wasn't rude to you." Her face was smiling politely, but her eyes weren't. It felt like sparks were flying between Lucy and Jessica. After a tense moment, it was Lucy who broke first. "Fine. I'll let it slide this time. Our companies have had a long-standing relationship since my father's time." "Let's keep it that way," Lucy said, standing up and exiting the reception room with the click-clack of her heels. Quickly, Emily went to see Lucy out. The sound of the door slamming shut was the cue that allowed me to finally relax. Considering my unusual reaction, there would likely be questions from Jessica. The sinking feeling of having to explain my past to her weighed me down. Apparently, she's undergoing co-training. She may come around again, but you don't have to deal with her, Tom. "Let's have Emily grow into the role instead," Jessica said with a reassuring pat on my shoulder. Feeling the warmth of her hand, I was on the verge of tears. In the end, Jessica never asked me the reason I was upset that day, and we finished our day's work. I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me. At the meeting the next day, it was decided that Emily would handle Lucy's account, and I was designated as her assistant. I briefly explained to Emily that Lucy and I were high school classmates. From the previous day's events, Emily seemed to have picked up on my reluctance to deal with Lucy. I'm truly grateful for Emily's hard work. She tried her best to cater to Lucy's needs so I wouldn't have to face her. If there was any mistake, as her senior, I'd have to represent the company in front of Lucy. Emily carefully continued the dealings with Lucy's firm. Initially, Lucy demanded me, but when she realized her requests were being denied, she began other tactics to annoy us. She started bringing non-native English speakers to business meetings, sometimes just acquaintances, and at times introduced as co-owners. Emily could handle Spanish, French, and Chinese, But occasionally Lucy would bring along someone who spoke Italian, Portuguese, or Japanese, which Emily couldn't handle. In such cases, Jessica quickly stepped in to support Emily. I felt guilty watching this, knowing I couldn't help. I felt bad burdening my junior, Emily, and worrying Jessica. I kept thinking I was a failure as a professional. One day, our always cheerful Jessica was out sick with a fever. It's rare for her to call in sick, so everyone was concerned. According to Emily, she was overworked and sleep-deprived, leading to a weakened immune system, and she caught a cold. Though it was an unfortunate situation, I hope she'd take a good rest. If Jessica isn't here to help and Lucy brings someone I can't communicate with. Emily gazed anxiously at the words Jessica absent, written on the whiteboard, and her fears became a reality. While I, who rarely goes out for client visits, was out assisting a colleague, Lucy suddenly arrived with a troublesome matter. When I returned to the office, I could hear Lucy berating Emily throughout the floor. Rushing into the room, I saw Emily being yelled at by Lucy. It seemed that today's negotiation required Italian, Emily's weakness. You do realize this is a trading company, right? How do you work here not knowing Italian? Or are you just looking down on us? Yelling at Emily without a second thought, Lucy's face didn't show a hint of anger. She was grinning with a nasty smile, seemingly enjoying the situation to the fullest. It looked as if she had found her prey. Your usual helpful supervisor isn't here today. I heard she's feeling under the weather. Can't even take care of her own health? That's so third-rate. Beside the sarcastic Lucy, a young Italian who didn't seem to understand what was going on was nervously watching Emily and Lucy. He was probably dragged here against his will by Lucy. Well, speak up. Can't do business with someone I introduce you to. Or are you going to apologize for not understanding? With Emily's head lowered, Lucy continued to tap her on the back of the head rhythmically with a rolled-up document. Emily's back visibly shivered. Colleagues also observed the situation from a distance, running around, searching for someone in the other departments who could speak Italian. Meanwhile, Lucy's attitude kept escalating. Can't even explain. Come here right now. Saying this, she forcefully pulled Emily off the couch. The moment I saw that, something snapped inside me. Is there an issue here? I quickly brushed off a hand Lucy had on Emily's shoulder and shielded her behind me. Oh, Tom. Long time, no see. Are you here to play in her place? Lucy, finding a new target, had a cruel glint in her eyes. Ignoring her completely, I'd addressed the flustered young Italian man. Are you interested in doing business with our company? I wasn't speaking in English. Italian flowed naturally for me. The young man seemed relieved to finally hear his native language, while Lucy was stunned, staring at me in disbelief. The young man excitedly explained his plan, and as I engaged with him, Emily seemed genuinely surprised. All this time, she thought I was just some guy who did menial tasks, but suddenly I was speaking Italian fluently and handling the negotiation. I couldn't blame her for being taken aback. During the negotiation, Lucy glared at me resentfully. In the end, the young man and I shook hands, laughed about the potential for a big deal, and wrapped up our discussion. Emily escorted him to the door so he could report the outcome to his boss right away. Back in the reception room, Lucy and I locked eyes, neither of us looking away. Nothing's changed with you. You still haven't grown up. I was the first to speak. The Lucy I once found intimidating didn't scare me at all today. Maybe successfully navigating that tough negotiation boosted my confidence. Excuse me? What are you trying to say? Lucy, seemingly caught off guard, retorted in her usual high and mighty attitude, but I sensed a hint of panic. What I'm saying is that you're acting childish, still pulling the same stunts you did in high school, despite your age. Once I started, I couldn't hold back. Words I'd held in for so long came pouring out. You always need someone by your side because you haven't improved your Spanish at all. Babysitting an inept assistant like you must be tough. Don't you realize you're a burden? I'd figured out pretty early on that Lucy wasn't proficient in Spanish, or Chinese for that matter. Being the daughter of a trading company CEO, she likely bore the stamp of failure, masking her insecurities by acting tough. I realize this now, perhaps because I've grown up. What do you know? She hurled the paper she was holding at me, her voice shaking with anger, her clenched fists trembling. Just because you can effortlessly speak other languages, you think you're so great. Give me a break. Lucy's yelling sounded more like a desperate scream. Looking back to high school, I realized that her poor treatment of me was likely driven by her own insecurities. After graduation, I found out her father was the CEO of a trading company, and I vaguely recalled her struggles with Spanish classes. Deal with your issues yourself. You're a grown-up after all, I said, watching her face turn beet red with embarrassment. Grabbing her bag, she stormed out of the reception room, her heels echoing on the floor. I thought maybe I'd been too harsh, but I didn't have the luxury of choosing my words carefully, and I did have some grudges. I hoped she'd forgive me for being a tad sharp. Why did you keep quiet about being able to speak? Are you still hiding something from me? Jessica's voice suddenly broke in, startling me. I turned to see her looking pale, her lips a troubling color, glaring at me with an upward gaze. Jessica, you look terrible. Of course I do. I'm still running a fever, but got called in. Still, I'm glad I came. Got to see something interesting. She sat next to me, and Emily, returning from seeing off our guest, asked Jessica with concern, "Are you okay?" "Don't worry about me. Everyone, get back to work," Jessica replied, clearing the room. I braced for reprimand. It seemed I'd been neglecting my duty by claiming I couldn't do what was expected. I'd have no right to complain if I got fired for negligence. "You're such a lying prince," Jessica said unexpectedly. I was dumbfounded. "What?" I stammered. "Don't you remember me? That's cruel." I looked closely at her face. She was feverish, pale, and had slightly red eyes as if she'd been crying. Suddenly, memories flooded back. "Oh, we've met before, right?" It hit me. The girl with swollen red eyes, crying in a foreign park. "In Germany?" She smiled warmly. "You finally remember. Since that day, you've been my prince on a white horse." Back then, I'd approached the crying girl, saying, "If you can speak multiple languages, the world becomes so much bigger. It's a waste to confine yourself." Her tears stopped, and I felt relief. "I always wanted to meet the boy from that time again," Jessica admitted. "Your personality seems different now, though." She chuckled, recalling how she'd gathered the courage to talk to a classmate the next day, which broke down invisible barriers. With her parents' global jobs, she'd moved from place to place, and we almost crossed paths many times. "Quite the close calls," she noted. "I thought we had a fateful reunion overseas, not here of all places." Pouting, she looked childish. Truth be told, I often went back to that park, hoping to find her, but life took me elsewhere. "It's quite a curious connection we have," I managed to say. "More like fate, don't you think?" Jessica replied, grinning. "You expanded my world, so you have a responsibility to stay by my side in this vast world. Understand?" Such a forceful approach was just like her. But I didn't mind it at all. With the world being so vast, I wonder how I got caught. "Don't you think you're getting a little cheeky?" The image of her laughing so hard she'd fall over in a wedding dress was a scene for a not-so-distant future. Running from her, who had strong-armed fate into granting this chance encounter, seemed impossible. I guess if this were a novel, it would be a happy ending. "My name is David. I'm just an average office worker. I'm not really into standing out, so I'm pretty quiet at the office. I just get through the work given to me, and if I finish without mistakes, I consider it a job well done. While my colleagues are hustling to climb the corporate ladder, I'm not really interested in promotions. I just hope for a peaceful day every day. Luckily, I ended up working for a top-tier company. I rarely have to work overtime, and I think my salary is pretty decent compared to others my age. My days are pretty much the same. I just go to work and come home every day, cook up a simple meal, enjoy my dinner while watching TV, and then head to bed. But maybe this monotonous life is what happiness is all about. That's what I've been thinking. I don't have a family anymore. Both my parents have passed away. I still remember that time I was in second grade. That day, both my parents had the day off, and they went out in their car saying they had some major shopping to do. They said they'd be back by the time I got home from school, but they weren't back by evening. As night fell, a neighbor lady, Mrs. Wilson, approached me. I had been sitting in front of the house for hours, so she probably got concerned. When I explained the situation, she took me to the nearby police station. I don't know what Mrs. Wilson told them, but I remember the police suddenly getting very busy. They told me that my parents might have been in an accident. I was taken to the hospital by the police. However, upon arrival, I was told the devastating news that both my parents had died. The only thing I remember from the hospital was seeing the bodies of my mom and dad. I can't recall what happened after, like the funeral or what happened to our house. Maybe the mental shock was too big, as I seemed to have lost some of my memories. Next thing I knew, I was in an orphanage. I had no grandparents or relatives, so I had nowhere else to go. There were other kids in the facility, but I didn't really interact with them. I just followed the rules set by the staff and kept to myself. I stayed at the orphanage until I turned 18 and moved out after graduating high school. Maybe I should go to college was my main thought. With that in mind, I went on to college. Thanks to the savings and insurance money left by my parents, I could attend college without financial worries. I went to school, worked a part-time job, came home, and slept. I became less talkative after my parents' death, and that hasn't changed even now as an adult. I guess I've always avoided interacting with people, and being bad at expressing my emotions probably didn't help. I've never really had close friends, let alone a significant other, mostly just acquaintances. I had always thought I'd probably end up being single, and I was okay with being alone. Even though I was just living an ordinary life, something unexpected happened one day I'll never forget. It was when I turned 30. On that day, I was working as usual. Things were going smoothly, and I was having a rather laid-back day. I decided to get some office supplies from the supply cabinet. To my surprise, we were running low on a lot of items. Normally, the newer employees would restock the supplies, but I thought since I had some time, why not do it myself? So I said, "I've got some free time. I'll go get the supplies," and headed to the supply room. As I switched on a light and entered the room, I began to load up a cart with supplies from my list. Then a woman from another department walked in. Our eyes met, and we gave each other a courteous nod. Wow, a pretty girl just walked in. That's what crossed my mind instantly. It wasn't a crush or anything, but I found myself wondering, is she from the next department? I don't recall such a pretty girl working here. Taking a closer look, she had these cute beauty marks under her eyes, which made her already cool-looking eyes appear even more attractive. No, don't keep staring. It'd be so embarrassing if she caught me. I realized I'd been unintentionally staring and felt a rush of embarrassment. Taking a brief deep breath, I composed myself and went back to collecting the supplies. But then it happened. Suddenly, there was a deep rumbling sound, followed by a strong side-to-side shake. It was an earthquake. The shaking grew more intense. Being in the supply room, there was a high risk of things falling down. The spot where she and I were located was at the back of the supply room, and the exit was too far. With the intense shaking, it felt too risky to make a dash for it. Cover your head. Use a basket or a box upside down and protect yourself, I shouted instinctively. The tremor felt like it lasted forever, but thanks to the fixed shelves in the supply room, a major disaster was avoided. Supplies were scattered all over the place, but neither of us got hurt. "Are you okay?" I rushed over and asked her. She seemed fine, replying, "Yeah, that was quite a shock. It lasted quite a while, didn't it?" She slowly got up and added, "It's quite a mess here, but maybe we should head outside first and check on others." Concerned about potential aftershocks and with the supply room door still closed, I started heading toward the door. "Oops, sorry." She bumped into my back. "Something wrong?" Looking at the storage room door, I was taken aback and stood there. She leaned over from behind me and was equally stunned. To our disbelief, cardboard boxes that had been piled near the door had collapsed, blocking our exit. To make matters worse, it seemed a box had opened, scattering promotional items all over the place. "We can't get out this way. Should we clean this up?" she asked. She agreed with a sigh. I started moving the heavier boxes, asking her to pick up the lighter promotional items. Why of all places did it have to block the door? She complained, but continued neatly placing the scattered items back into the boxes. "Just hang on a bit longer. We'll clear a path to the door soon." I rolled up my sleeves, ready for some heavy lifting. "All right, once we move this, we can get the door open." At last, we cleared a path to the door. Thinking we could finally leave, I twisted the doorknob and pushed. Thud. Huh. A dull noise echoed, and despite several attempts, the door would only open a few inches. "This isn't good," I murmured to myself. Peeking through the small gap in the door, I saw a cart loaded with supplies blocking it from the other side. Other boxes had fallen over in the corridor, making it even harder to access. The cardboard boxes and cart had gotten jammed in such a way that the door wouldn't open. I tried jostling the door multiple times, but it wouldn't budge. "We're stuck," I sighed, feeling a wave of despair. But on the bright side, other coworkers were still around. Someone would eventually come. So I decided to team up with her and start cleaning up the scattered promotional items and supplies. "We really got trapped," she eased, noticing my involuntary sigh, and said in a cheery voice, "Yeah, I really thought we'd get out." I responded, laughing. However, our conversation was brief. We silently continued our tasks. As I was thinking we were nearly done, an unmistakable growling sound broke the silence. I turned my head toward the sound. She looked embarrassed as she held her stomach. That was mine. "Did you hear that?" Her face turned beet red with embarrassment. "Yes, I heard it loud and clear." I said it honestly, and we both burst out laughing. Although we were strangers, that little moment of laughter lightened the mood. While continuing to tidy up, we chatted a bit and shared our names and departments. Her name was Sarah, 4 years younger than me, and she worked in the department next to mine. As we talked, a voice from the other side of the door called out, "Hey, is anyone there?" Peeking through the gap in the door, a voice said, "Hold on, we'll clear the way." A few folks moved carts and other obstacles, enabling our safe exit. Luckily, the earthquake's damage was minimal. Just some items had fallen from shelves and desks. By the next day, we were back to normal. From then on, my days were filled with routine work, yet I would often bump into Sarah, whom I'd met in the storage room, in the hallway, lobby, or the staff cafeteria. I hadn't realized it before, but we had crossed paths frequently within the company. We began greeting each other whenever we met. One day, during lunch, while I was eating in the cafeteria, Sarah approached, asking, "Mind if I join you?" We took that opportunity to express our gratitude for that day we spent trapped together. It seemed we never found the right moment to stop and talk about it before. Sarah also wanted to thank me, saying, "I'm so glad you were there with me that day. I'm not sure if I could have gotten out if I was alone in the storage room. You really saved me." From then on, I often chatted with Sarah due to our lunch breaks frequently overlapping. We often eat together or have coffee afterwards. Though I was always a bit shy and struggled to converse, Sarah was always proactive in starting conversations, so there was never a lull. Eventually, We began to occasionally dine out in the evenings. It felt strange for a socially awkward guy like me to be out and about engaging in so much conversation. Somehow, I just clicked with Sarah. After one of our meals, Sarah opened up about her feelings for me. It was the first time that someone confessed to me like that. I was taken aback, but that's when I realized my own feelings. Soon, Sarah and I started dating. Things moved swiftly, and before we knew it, we were discussing marriage. After a successful proposal, I visited Sarah's parents. On the day of the visit, Sarah's parents, who also lived with her older brother and his wife, warmly welcomed us. While I had planned for a brief visit, they insisted on having dinner together, making me feel right at home. Being a man of few words, I barely answered the family's questions. They even inquired about my family. I answered all their questions honestly. However, a few days after the visit, I received a message from Sarah. Apparently, Sarah's sister-in-law, Lisa, wanted to have a word with me. I wondered if they might be against our marriage, but that wasn't the case. I was told we'd discuss the matter in person, so a meeting was arranged between Sarah, Lisa, and me. On the appointed day, we met at a quiet cafe. Let me get straight to the point. Lisa began, then started asking detailed questions about my mother, when she passed away, her maiden name, place of birth, blood type, and more. She also inquired why I didn't have any grandparents or relatives. I answered everything within my knowledge. After a pause, she said, "Look at these photos. Does this woman look like your mother?" She showed me 2 pictures of a young woman who unmistakably resembled my mom. After confirming the resemblance, she took another breath and asked, "You're an only child, right?" When I replied yes, Lisa gave a quiet nod. She took another deep breath and said, "Let me tell you the truth about you." Looking me straight in the eye, confused, I waited for her next words. "This woman, she's my mother." Lisa's lips trembled as she spoke. I was in disbelief, asking her to repeat herself over and over, but she was unequivocal. "She's my mother." What does that mean? I tried to organize my thoughts as I listened to Lisa's story. Lisa had been told she was an orphan and was raised by her grandparents. One day, while cleaning up, she found a photograph. When she showed it to her grandmother, she hesitated at first, but eventually admitted that the woman in the photo was Lisa's mother. She also explained why Lisa had been separated from her parents. To start with, Lisa had a brother 2 years her senior. Their mother became pregnant with him at 16. Both parents were the same age, meaning the father was also 16 at the time. The mother was determined to have the child, and the father intended to marry her when he turned 18. However, this was met with strong opposition from the mother's parents. These grandparents were strict and believed in strict adherence to family traditions. Yet, the young mother persisted and gave birth at the age of 16. Afterward, while juggling jobs and having dropped out of high school, she entrusted childcare either to daycares or her parents. The father, on the other hand, continued attending high school while working part-time jobs to make ends meet. Both were genuinely committed to raising their child despite the continuing objections from the grandparents. The young couple had decided they would marry once they turned 18. Then Lisa was conceived. The news infuriated the grandparents, but the baby was eventually born. This birth took place when both parents were 18, and they intended to register their marriage that very year. However, the grandparents staunchly opposed, especially against the father, whom they perceived as the culprit for their daughter's teenage pregnancy. Frictions became a daily affair, primarily revolving around the children's future and living. They chastised their young daughter often, remarking, "You're just a child who had a child. Listen to what we say." Still, the determined mother, aiming to keep her family intact, was met with a stern, "Leave the kids and get out. You're disowned." Numerous attempts were made to reconcile, and she tried taking her children with her, but the grandparents stood firm. Ultimately, she was estranged without any contact with her children. I was shocked to learn about the tumultuous past of my parents, and the fact that I had a sibling was a revelation to me. Incidentally, the grandfather has since passed away, and the grandmother, though still alive, is now in a nursing home. Lisa, without mentioning anything about me, had inquired again about her mother. Moreover, given that our grandmother's surname was quite unique, she was certain that they were blood relatives. The week after hearing the story, I, along with Sarah and Lisa, visited our mother's childhood home. Presently, my elder brother's family is living in our grandmother's house, and it was the first time I was introduced to him. Following that, Lisa and I went to the nursing home where our grandmother resided. Although hesitant to meet her at first, we decided to have a conversation. Initially, our grandmother couldn't believe my existence and was taken aback, but noticing the resemblance I bore to my mother, she mentioned how much I looked like her. Our grandmother was unaware that my mother had married my father, and she certainly had no knowledge of the tragic car accident that took my mother's life. Hearing this, tears streamed down our grandmother's face. She deeply regretted disowning her daughter due to parental pride and expressed her desire to apologize if given a chance to meet her daughter again. The town where my mother and Lisa grew up was quite a distance from my current residence, yet little did I know my sister lived so close by. That year was not just significant for meeting Sarah, but also for discovering and connecting with blood relatives, like my siblings and grandmother. Go ahead a few years. Daddy. Daddy. All right, let's all play together, shall we? My children were all around me, immobile. My children adore their father. Oh, and let's not even talk about me. I also have a thing for him. Sarah gave me a hug as well, teasing me. Sarah, please, don't you too. Everyone clutched to me and giggled. At the age of 38, I lead a busy life with my 3 treasured sons and my wife, Sarah, and we will soon be welcoming our 4th child. Since then, my sister, who lives close by, and her 3 sons have kept in touch with me, and my kids play together like siblings. Even though my older brother lives far away, my sister's family and I always make time to visit him throughout the summer vacation. It's interesting that my brother and I share facial traits, and what's even more interesting is how much my brother's kids look like me when I was younger. If we look closely, we can see that all of the children have a lot in common. We all appear to have the same parents. We frequently joke that the connection of blood is in fact enigmatic. Our interactions felt normal right away, even though I had never lived with my siblings. It surprises me that I get along with my siblings because I was never good at social connections. I never thought I would be surrounded by the warmth of a family in a matter of years, as I had previously thought I would live a life of seclusion. It's true that life is unpredictable. I want to treasure this unanticipated joy. A few years later, Daddy, Daddy. All right, let's all play together, shall we? My children were all around me, immobile. My children adore their father. Oh, and let's not even talk about me. I also have a thing for him. Sarah gave me a hug as well, teasing me. Sarah, please don't you too. Everyone clutched to me and giggled. At the age of 38, I lead a busy life with my 3 treasured sons and my wife, Sarah, and we will soon be welcoming our 4th child. Since then, my sister, who lives close by, and her 3 sons have kept in touch with me, and my kids play together like siblings. Even though my older brother lives far away, my sister's family and I always make time to visit him throughout the summer vacation. It's interesting that my brother and I share facial traits, and what's even more interesting is how much my brother's kids look like me when I was younger. If we look closely, we can see that all of the children have a lot in common. We all appear to have the same parents. We frequently joke that the connection of blood is in fact enigmatic. Our interactions felt normal right away, even though I had never lived with my siblings. It surprises me that I get along with my siblings because I was never good at social connections. I never thought I would be surrounded by the warmth of a family in a matter of years, as I had previously thought I would live a life of seclusion. It's true that life is unpredictable. I want to treasure this unanticipated joy.